Uh, I want to begin by thanking Joyce Wallace and Susan Alcorn, who quite a long time ago asked me if I would speak. They do things so far in advance. They invited me 5 years ago to appear today. So how can you say you're busy? I mean, I had no excuses, right? Uh, and I did it primarily, though, because Joyce and Stuart Wallace and Susan Alcorn have been longtime friends. And I want to do a special shout out to Joyce and Stuart because when I began my political career, I ran for a state representative in 1980. Joyce and Stuart were among my very first supporters. And because they were so well known and so respected in my House district, I have no doubt that I owe my entire political career to the two of them for igniting that win back in 1980. So let's give them a round of applause. I'm not blaming you, however, for the many losses that I had, just the wins, okay? What I want to talk about today, and Reverend Bud, thank you for, where's Reverend Bud? Okay, Reverend Bud, thank you for letting me be your warm-up act this morning. First of all, I should tell you that I have a tendency to talk a long time. And Susan Alcorn doesn't know this, but she sent an email to Joyce, and Joyce was not supposed to forward it to me, but she did. Those things happen in the world. And here's what Susan said to Joyce. Lee's a nice guy. He's a good speaker, but he goes on forever. I'm sort of paraphrasing. Now, Susan, you didn't know I saw that, did you? You're very embarrassed now, aren't you? Okay. But the bottom line is, Susan's right. I do go on forever. So, as a result, Joyce Wallace is positioned in the front row as your security, meaning that after I've spoken for about 25 minutes, she will be giving me the high sign. And if I pass 30, Susan Alcorn will be coming up personally and taking me off the stage. Okay? Okay. The hook, exactly. Now, I will tell you that it does remind me, and by the way, I'll tell you when my speech begins, so when you can start counting, okay. That this is warm-up. This doesn't count towards the 30 minutes, does it, Susan? Okay. When I first ran for public, Joyce, you're already looking at your watch. Give me a break. Okay. When I first ran for public office in 1980, I was going to the University Heights Democratic Ward Club. It was a snowy January night. I was a nervous wreck because other than a couple speeches I had given when I was elected president of Fernway Elementary School in 1963, I really hadn't given that many speeches. I was running for office for the first time. I was a nervous wreck. And I don't have a great sense of direction. So make a long story short, I got lost. And I show up at the University Heights Ward Club, almost a room identical to this, but more rows than this. And I walk in, and I'm about 40 minutes late. And I walk in, and there's one man sitting in like the 7th row. And I'm thinking, oh my God, where is everybody? He said, son, everybody left. They waited and waited and waited. You got to get your act together. You're not going to win this race unless you get there on time. And I said, well, I apologize. I'm embarrassed. But I said, would you do me a favor? Would you just allow me to get the nervousness out of my system and go up to the podium and give my talk anyway? And you listen to me, and then you can critique me. He said, go ahead. So I go up to the podium, and I give my talk. It probably went on for about 15 minutes, and I read every word because I was a nervous wreck. At the end of the 15 minutes, I said, sir, you are patient. You are nice. I can't believe you listened to my entire talk. And he said something I'll never forget. He said, son, don't thank me. I'm the next speaker. So you don't know how happy I am that so many of you came this morning, because I'm used to having one person in the 7th row. Okay, now the time begins, Joyce. Okay, what I want to talk to you today about is not just Cleveland, but cities around the world. Now, when I say right up there, Cleveland's secret sauce, I'll begin with a confession. There is no secret sauce. We all know that every city is different, every strategy is different, but over the years, having served in elected office for almost 20 years, and having run a nonprofit, the Center for Families and Children, for 7 years, and now for the last 3.5 years running a national organization called CEOs for Cities, I have learned some lessons that I want to share with you in the next 20 minutes or so. So here's what I mean by when I say secret sauce. This is a page out of the diary of my father-in-law, Mike Zone, who was a prisoner of war captured in the Battle of the Bulge. We often wondered how Mike Zone survived when younger men and stronger men and healthier men and smarter men did not survive. But when Mike came back to his home on West 65th in Detroit, now known as the Detroit Shoreway area, he didn't like to talk about it. And believe it or not, it wasn't until after he passed away in 1974 that my mother-in-law, Mary Zone, some of you may have heard of her, she was also in the Cleveland City Council, pulled out of the closet the diary that he had kept as a prisoner of war and shared it with her 9 children, one of whom is my wife, Peggy. And it's the most remarkable book I've ever read in my life. It's still legible. It is in the Western Reserve Historical Society. And there are 2 things that jump out from the pages of my father-in-law's diary. The first are the 9 children that he would someday raise, one of whom, of course, would be my wife. And the second were intricate pasta recipes from a man who loved to eat, but had no idea how to cook. And yet these pasta recipes were so exquisite, so detailed, that when he was finally liberated and came back to Cleveland, my mother-in-law, who was a great cook, used those recipes almost to a T for years later. But when he came back to Cleveland, guess what? He still couldn't cook. And he didn't even understand his own recipes. So how did he survive? Mike Zone could see beyond the cruelty of the guards. He could see beyond the barbed wire. He could see something that many of the other men could not. And you know what it was? His future. When I served as the Attorney General of Ohio, I traveled to Ohio's prisons. And I met young men and women who had no sense of their own future. For them, prison was a land beyond pain. And then when I served in the legislature and as Attorney General and ran the Center for Families and Children, here's what I learned. The most precious gift you can give a child, but for that matter, any human being, and the most precious gift you can give a city or a state, or yes, even a country, is the ability to see your own future and to envision it, and to use the most powerful emotion on earth, hope. The ability to see beyond your immediate circumstances, often which are challenging and difficult, and to see something brighter. And I've taken that lesson in all the jobs I've had, and I've taken it now as I consult with mayors and others about how to make their cities more successful. And I always begin by saying that you must begin with a vision of your city. But the question is, why do we even care about cities? Well, the answer is that I believe that if there's any group of people that I ever speak to, this group of people, probably more than almost any other group I speak to, understands this. You want to change the world. You want to use that divine spark inside of you to be able to not just change your life, but to change the lives of people that you will never meet. That's why I entered public office. It's why I do what I do today. But the question is, how do we change the world? Well, I can tell you how not to change the world. I was moderating a panel at the Clinton Global Initiative a few years ago, and sitting next to me was the president of the country of Iceland. And he said something that I will never forget. He said, "The problem with you Americans," he said, "you spend too much time waiting for Washington." And he's right. Washington has never been more hyper-partisan. It's never been more dysfunctional. It is not the place where things happen. It's where the things go to die. And so the truth of the matter is that if you do want to change the world, you have to focus on bottom-up change with everyday citizens and with the last refuge of functional government that is the least partisan. You start with your city. That's where change in the world is happening today. More than at any other time in our lifetime, cities are where the action is. Now imagine yourself coming in from outer space, and you see the planet Earth, and you see dark space and you see white space, what you see as you start to approach Earth is lots of water, lots of desert, no people. And only until you get closer to Earth and you start to see these lights do you see the fact that these people, called human beings, tend to huddle close to each other. And then tend to huddle close to each other in places called cities. Do you know that 243 million Americans live on 3% of our land, called cities? 3%. Why do we huddle? For the reason you're here today at church. Because we recognize that even in the age of the internet, by the way, I'm sure that's the signal that I'm already speaking too long, I believe. Even in the age of the internet, our ability to connect with each other physically, not just virtually, is the defining characteristic of our species. Now, in cities, it also means that we have poverty, we can have overcrowding, we can have traffic congestion, we can have pollution, but if you change the way you look at things, the things that you look at change. And so I say that you need to look at cities in a very different way, and not as a collection of problems, but as a collection of assets. Let me give you an example. Back in 1896, this is the way that Olympians and athletes cleared the high bar. It was called the scissors kick. Now, what's interesting about this is that through no technology whatsoever, just a different way of looking at things, in 1912, coaches said there's a better way to go over that bar. It's called the Western Roll. Same group of people, same bar, no technology, just looking at things in a different way. And then, in 1936, they used the straddle. Now, by looking at that picture, you can see why that didn't last very long. Okay. But the bottom line is that it wasn't until 1968 by a young guy by the name of Dick Fosbury from Oregon, who was laughed at by his teammates and laughed at his college by his coaches because he said, "I think we should go over backwards on our back." And interesting today, the Fosbury flop is the only way to clear the high bar. It's the way you look at things that determines the outcome. So I apply that to cities as well. Now, this is one of my favorite cartoons from New Yorker magazine. It has a mother pigeon talking to her baby pigeons, a man underneath, and the caption is, "Today's lesson is about targets of opportunity." What we need to do in every city is look at the targets of opportunity. That's where we need to make our investments. So you have to look at a city as if it were a startup. Now think about this. The oldest institution on earth today are cities. So it's hard for a mayor or for people in cities to wrap their head around the fact that you should look at cities in a new way. But I say if you really want to reinvent your city, if you want to make it a great city, act as if you were starting all over again and view it as a startup. And look at your city like this. A city where people connect, where ideas connect, where innovation happens. Do you know that there are 65 million people moving to cities every single year on this planet? Now, admittedly, most of that is in Asia, but it's a massive movement from rural and suburban to the city. That's the equivalent to adding about 10 Chicagos every year to the nation's urban population. And they're the incubators of innovation. 70% of our gross domestic product, GDP, comes from cities and metro regions. So this is where the action is. And we also live in a world where things are coming at us very fast. And so as a result, you also have to look at your city not just as a startup, but be flexible and to be able to move quickly. Some of you may have heard of Wayne Gretzky, probably the greatest hockey player who ever lived. And somebody once asked Wayne Gretzky, "What makes you a Hall of Fame hockey player?" And he humbly said, "I just learned how to skate where the puck was going, not where the puck was." That's economic development too. If you're looking around the corner to anticipate things that you cannot see, think about all the information created from the dawn of civilization until about 2003, all of it. The Bible, everything ever written, from the dawn of civilization to 2003. Imagine all that information. Today, according to Eric Schmidt, the CEO of Google, We produce the same amount of information, literally, every 2 days that we did from the dawn of civilization to 2003. That's what's happening around the world today. When Tom Friedman wrote the book, The World is Flat, it was a seminal book that made us understand that we live in a global economy where we're all interconnected. But what's interesting is that in many ways, 2005 were the old days, not the new days. 2005 were the old days. Why? Because when Tom Friedman wrote that book, Facebook didn't exist. Twitter was a sound. 4G was a parking place. The cloud was in the sky. LinkedIn was a prison. And apps were what you sent to college. Things have changed just since the old days of 2005. We send over 8 billion text messages every single day. Now, put that in perspective. There are 7 billion people on the planet. So we send more text messages in 24 hours than there are people on the planet. And here's something that almost no one in this room knows. Maybe Susan and Joyce know because they've heard me talk before, but I don't think anybody else knows. Do you know that 42% of the text messages sent around the world, and if you don't remember anything else today, please remember this. 42% of the text messages sent around the world are sent by one person, my daughter, Jessica. I'm seeing a mother and a daughter, and you relate to that, don't you, a little bit? Okay. Are you texting as I'm speaking, by the way? Okay, I just want to make sure. Okay, good, okay. Now, our son, Jason, graduated from Syracuse University a few years ago, and we said to Jason, the question every grandparent or parent would say to their child or their grandchild, what do you want to do with your life? And he said something I never would have thought to say to my mom and dad. He said, what I want to do, Mom and Dad, hasn't been invented yet. Now, those are the words out of my son's mouth, and I thought he was unique, but I now realize he's not. That's how you think, too. That's how this generation thinks. And you know what? They're right. We are educating young men and women for jobs that do not yet exist, using technologies that have not yet been invented to solve problems that even the smartest people on the planet don't even know are problems. That's not a challenge. That's a phenomenal opportunity. But it does mean that we're experiencing change. I also have had the privilege of traveling to many of Ohio's manufacturing plants, particularly automobile plants. You wouldn't recognize them. It's not your grandfather's auto plant anymore. There are much fewer people in them. They're primarily automated. It's amazing by the way, this is the sound system. And I have no idea what's going on there. I just tell you, that's what it is. If you're wondering what that is, it is the sound system. And I think it's because when my coat goes like this, it does that. So I just didn't want you to worry that there was something wrong in the building. So the joke is that the new modern manufacturing plant has 2 employees, a man and a dog. Now, what does that mean? Well, the man is there to feed the dog. But why is the dog there? To keep the man away from the machines. That, unfortunately, is the kind of society we're moving to, and it's not all good because people are losing their jobs, but it does mean we're becoming more productive, and it means that our strategic plans have a sell-by date. They're expiring quicker than ever. Cities have a 2020 plan or a 2050 plan. Well, guess what? It's nice to have that vision far out, and you should have it. But the truth is you need to be updating your strategic plan about every 9 to 12 months because that's the kind of world we live in. So at CEOs for Cities, we look at cities in a different way. Each of you will get a copy of this today. It's in the back. And we look at cities from 4 dimensions that are called city vitals. And it's easy to remember because they spell out the word city. The connected city, the innovative city, the talented city, and your distinctive city. And we benchmark cities from those different vantage points. For example, we take a look at the voting patterns of a city and community involvement, economic integration, transit use, walkability, international students, foreign travel, internet connectivity, just to get a sense of how well they're connected within the city and to the rest of the global economy. Why? Because as I said earlier, according to Ed Glazer, the author of Triumph of the City from Harvard, he said our ability to connect with each other is the defining characteristic of our species. But guess what? Many of our cities are disconnected. The truth of the matter is that building stadiums, building great buildings is never enough unless you can connect your physical capital and your human capital and make it all a seamless web. Those are the great cities, as opposed to these individual silos where no one talks to each other. Those are the cities that are destined to fail. It's connecting the dots and connecting your assets in your city so that you have a true connected city. So, for example, you're connecting your downtown to your lakefront. You're connecting your neighborhoods to each other. You're connecting people to universities and to innovation. It's a constant process of connections that makes cities great. Now, there is a population today that is the most mobile population on Earth. They're called millennials. They're between the ages of about 24 and 35. And where are they moving to? They're moving to cities. You know why they're moving to cities? They like them, that's true. But why do they like them? Because they're connected. They can live, eat, shop, play without even getting in a car. That's where cities are headed, and that's what's making cities great. To be able to live above where you shop and eat is the new American city. And it's not just the young and restless, as we call them, who are doing that. It's also the retiring and the restless. Those who are empty nesters who are saying, I want to change in my life. I don't want to have to get in a car. I want to walk. And so the people who are moving to cities at the fastest rate are those between the ages of 25 and 34 and those over the age of 50 who are saying, this is the kind of life that I want to have. Now, you would think that we're a mobile society, right? We're not. The truth is that most people don't move. We're at a 50-year low. In the 1960s, 5 out of people moved their home. Today, it's 1 out of 10. But the population that does move are those millennials. But at age 35, they get married, they have children, and they stop moving. So if you want to have a great city, you need to capture them before they get to 35. And so, how old are you? How old? 13. We have a little time for you. Good. But when you age 35, wherever you are at that moment, you stop. It's like duck, duck, goose. You stop. So we hope you're in Cleveland on your 35th birthday, so you stay here. So get it out of your system, move anywhere you want after you graduate high school and college, but come back here before you're 35 or we're going to lose you. So, what are cities doing? Cities are imagining things, because if you don't let what you know limit what you can imagine, phenomenal things can happen in cities. I travel the country, and here's some of the things I've seen. This is a ditch in Oklahoma City. There was a line item in the budget of the mayor of Oklahoma City for mowing the ditch. But guess what? It used to be a river. And it dried up, and it was no longer an asset. And the mayor said, that's crazy. One of the things we need to do is take advantage of the fact that we can actually make this into a body of water again. And yes, it'll cost money, but imagine how it'll transform the city. This is what it looks like today. That's the same ditch. It is now the home of the Olympic training site for rowing. That's Oklahoma City. Here's another example in Oklahoma City. This was a canal, same thing. There had been a body of water that dried up. They built pavement over it. This is what it looks like today, the Bricktown Canal. These kinds of transformations are happening all around the country, not in Paris, not in London, but in Milwaukee and in Tulsa and in Cleveland and in Oklahoma City. That's Miami. There's a developer down there who has learned that you don't just buy a building, you buy an entire neighborhood. Because if you just reform that building, that's not saying very much. But if you can do like what Dan Gilbert's doing in Detroit, or what Jessica Goldman is doing in Miami, and transform an entire neighborhood, then it comes alive. And so that's that same building that you just saw a second ago. And she's doing that in blocks all over Miami and creating an arts district. This is something called the High Line. Have you ever heard of it in New York City? It used to be a freight line. It was unused. There was high grass, freight cars. It's elevated in New York City. Freight cars used to drive through it. Somebody said, why don't we make that into an above-ground park? Today, it's one of the greatest places to go in New York City, maybe even in the world. It's called the High Line. And people literally took assets they already had and transformed them into something new. And it's happening right here in Cleveland. This is Public Square. And this is what Public Square will look like in less than 2 years. Notice that it's connecting, that we no longer have street that's actually separating the two quadrants of two of the four quadrants of Shaker Square. It's one connected area. This is what's happening around the world. Connecting people so that there is a magnet for people to come together. The Gordon Square Arts District, where my father-in-law, Mike Zone, settled his family, Detroit Shoreway area, completely being transformed. If you haven't gone to 65th in Detroit, go there. It's a phenomenal place, and it's happening in Ohio City. As Joyce said, it's happening in Detroit Shoreway, and it's happening downtown on East 4th Street. A very small street, not much bigger than this room. Why? Because density, where people actually are huddled against each other, is where the exciting things are happening in cities today. When I ran the Center for Families and Children, we wanted to relocate our headquarters. And so I said, let's look for a place that maybe 10 years from now will be the hottest place in Cleveland. And you think about it, what are our two major economic centers in Cleveland? They're downtown and University Circle, but they're totally disconnected. It seems like they're 40 miles apart as opposed to 3 miles apart. But the Health Line now connects down Euclid Avenue, downtown and Euclid and University Circle. And guess what's happening? No surprise. Buildings are coming up, retail's moving up. People are moving along the transit line of Euclid Avenue, and that's where we moved the Center for Families and Children. That's happening all across America. In our flats, which had a rebirth and then died, same thing's happening. We're connecting back to our waterfront. That's what the flats are going to look like within less than 2 years. You're all going to want to go down there. That's our city. That's not Barcelona. That's Cleveland, Ohio. So we also look at how innovative a city are. We look at patents and venture capital and self-employment and small businesses, because all successful cities have something in common. You can attract all the smart people you want to your city, but if you don't connect them and find ways to collaborate, you're not a successful city. So what's happening is there are innovation districts and hubs that are being created. You've heard of probably the most famous one is the Research Triangle in Raleigh, North Carolina, but they're happening in Boston and other places. What do I mean by innovation corridor? It's where businesses locate, and they all locate in the city, not in some suburban office park. They attract talent so that if you lose your job, you don't lose your parking place. Because you can go right next door to another company and get a job because of the density in this innovation district. And so in Las Vegas, for example, Tony Hsieh, the CEO of Zappos, is investing $350 million in downtown Las Vegas. Unlike Google and Microsoft and Yahoo, who have suburban campuses, he's creating his campus in downtown Las Vegas and investing $350 million. Here in San Francisco, it's called the 5M Project at the corner of 5th and Mission. They're creating what's called not just a downtown district, a social district, where you have tech companies, where you have shopping and retail, where you have schools, everything within literally a 5-block radius. That's where cities are moving. We also look at talent. We look at, that's 5, by the way, Joyce just gave me 5 minutes, so that means I'm going to move very fast. So I'm now going to accelerate my talking, and hopefully you'll keep up with me. Ready? Go. We look at college attainment, creative professionals, young and restless, traded sector talent, international talent. We look at things because why? When I was the Lieutenant Governor and Director of Economic Development, I had a call one day from a woman named Ginger Graham. She was the CEO of Amlin Pharmaceuticals in San Diego. And she said to me, we're looking to locate a $500 million facility in Ohio. Do you want to compete? I said, of course I want to compete. She said, well, first you have to put money on the table. So we put millions of dollars of tax credits and loans on the table, and she calls me one day and says, guess what? Congratulations, you're now a finalist. It's down to you and one other state. I said, well, what do I have to do? She said, well, that was just the ticket of admission. You know what we really want? This is not a transaction. This is a generational decision. We are going to be moving 500 people to Ohio. We want to know you have good schools. We want to know you have a skilled workforce. We want to be able to make sure that the workforce meets our needs. And so we assembled all the colleges and universities and technical skills and listened to Amlin as to what they wanted and created a skilled workforce. And Amlin came to Ohio, not because of the money we gave them, that was the ticket of admission, but because we understood that in the end, the most precious commodity for any business is talent and skills. And then we look at distinctiveness. What makes you different? We look at whether a city is weird. Now, admittedly, that's a little strange, right? But today, weird is good. It's not bad. The weirder you are, the better you are. Why? Because you're distinctive. So we look at weirdness. We look at lots of different things to determine how distinctive you are. We look for your purple cow. In other words, what's different about this city than every other city that stands out? Or Dolly Parton, that great economist, once said, find out who you are and do it on purpose. And that's what every city needs to do, like, for example, Austin does with their Southwest Festival. And then finally, we've developed something called city dividends. City dividends are a way to move things forward. Do you know that the single greatest motivator of human behavior in any organization is what? The ability to see progress. If the mayor of Cleveland got up today and said, I'm going to solve poverty, none of you would believe him. But what if the mayor got up and said, I'm going to reduce poverty by 1%? That's progress. You would believe it. You'd mobilize behind them. That's measurable. So we have developed things called city dividends. For example, if you were to increase the college completion rate in our metro region by just 1%, not 10%, by 1%, the number of people in Cleveland who have a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree, that would increase the average earnings of our region literally by more than $1 billion. In fact, it would increase it by $143 billion nationwide. Or let's give you another example. What if we reduced the number of miles that the people in the United States drove by 1 mile per day per person? It would result in a savings of $31 billion in economic savings that is currently spent on all those kinds of expenses we use in filling up the gas tank, repairing the car, buying the car, maintaining the car. Or what if we reduce poverty by 1%? Not by 10%, but by 1%. $31 billion less money would be spent on anti-poverty programs. And so what we've done is basically created these dividends as a way to explain to people that all you have to do is move quickly and have a goal that's measurable, and then you can begin to see the progress. And so we actually thought that because the single most important thing you can do in a city is to have an educated workforce, we went to the Kresge Foundation and said, would you give us $1 million to run a prize competition for the city in America that increased its number of people who have a college degree the fastest over a 3-year period? They said, okay. So we now administer the Talent Dividend Prize. 57 cities, including Cleveland and Akron and Youngstown, are competing for $1 million to see if who can increase the number of people in their city and their region have a college degree. And on October 29th of this year in Washington, D.C., we'll award the $1 million. But that's not the beauty of it. Every city has gained by this because we created a learning network, and they all accelerated their progress because of the city dividend and the prize, and they move forward. I'm going to end with the Serenity Prayer for cities that I wrote. God, grant my city the humility to accept that there's always something more to learn from someone else, somewhere else. The speed to keep up with the world that's moving at lightning speed. The flexibility to adapt and change as we learn, and the wisdom not to let what we know limit what we can imagine. What do we all want more than anything else from our city? We want a place that we can call home, right? Where your grandchildren come back home, where your children come back home. In a sense, when it comes right down to it, if you can make people feel a sense of investment, that divine spark not just within us but within our own cities, and make them have a sense of belonging, that's the key. Yes, LeBron didn't come here for the money. He came here because he started thinking what it would be like to raise his family in his own hometown. If we start believing in ourselves, if we start like Mike Zone and seeing beyond the immediate problems and seeing a city that literally is truly connected, and start believing in ourselves and that divine spark, cities begin to transform. And so I say that we should do what Steve Jobs said. Tear down walls between the private and public and philanthropic sectors. Build bridges and connect our cities and people to each other. And light fires, meaning take some risks. Make some experiments in your cities to make them connected and innovative and talented and distinctive, and to be able to see a future that they can hope and that they can imagine. Thank you very much.
Lee, you have
Yes.
the magic to inspire, and it has been wonderful, really. Whether you've done Whether you were in the public area, the private area, the political area, you innovated. No wonder your son says, I want to do things that have not been discovered. You are that man yourself.
Oh, thank you very much, Joyce. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Now we have just a little business. Many of you perhaps have come here for the first time, and if you have, why, you have the opportunity of finding out what are going to be the topics and the speakers every single week by having an email sent to you. So we have some clipboards, and if you would just put your name and your information down, we'll keep in touch with you every week that we have a forum. Now, this is time for you to respond to what you heard today and to find the questions, find out what you want to learn from Lee Fisher, who we were so fortunate to have here today. So, who would like to ask the first question? I do appreciate it if you would stand up if you're able, and please speak clearly and loudly, even though you have a microphone that will be handed to you. First question?
Okay. Maybe you can give us as parents some hope. I'm father of 4 millennials, none of whom want to live in the most uncool state and city in the country,
Yes.
3 of whom are living in the Bay Area. What can we offer the hope of Cleveland? How's it going to compete with San Francisco, and how do I get my kids back home?
The question is, how do we compete with San Francisco, and how do we get our kids back home? Well, first of all, let them leave. And I mean that. Let them get out of their system that urge to experience other places. That's good, and that's not bad. But the truth of the matter is that if you want to find a city that is undergoing a rebirth, that is got exciting neighborhoods like Shaker Square and Ohio City and Detroit Shoreway and Tremont and Collinwood, if you want to go to a place that has great universities and great schools and is beginning to believe in itself, I would argue that what will happen is if you keep reminding them and showing them what Cleveland's doing, they will do what many people are doing. They're boomeranging back to their cities. And just make sure they boomerang before that 35th birthday. Because if at age 35 they're still in San Francisco, the research shows they're more likely to stay in San Francisco. How old are they? Focus on the 33-year-old. You got 2 years. Okay? Okay. My point is, I'm exaggerating a little, but my point is this. More and more and more young people are moving back to their cities. Why? Forbes just did an article about the 15 fastest emerging downtowns, and San Francisco and Chicago and New York City weren't on the list. It was Cleveland, it was Columbus, it was Cincinnati, it was Milwaukee, it was Nashville. My point is, mid-sized cities are undergoing a rebirth. But you have to start with your attitude. Don't be defensive about Cleveland. Start talking about the great things. Talk with pride and excitement. Will we be able to offer everything that San Francisco offers? No, but we can offer some things that they can't. In the sense that we can offer a place where people actually know each other by name, where there's a sense that you get the best of both worlds, a big city that feels small like a neighborhood. That's something people long for, a sense of belonging to a city. You don't feel, when you live in a place like Chicago and San Francisco, it's fun, but you don't feel like you belong in that city. You feel like you're visiting that city, that you're not there. And what people want more than anything else is a sense of belonging in their lives. And if you can create that in your city, if you can be Believe Land, not just Cleveland, you'll get them back. Am I calling on people? I guess I am. Oh, no, am I? Who's got this responsibility? Okay, I guess you do. Okay.
If you were county executive of Cuyahoga County, what would you do?
Okay, it's a good question. If I were the county executive of Cleveland, or Cuyahoga County, the first thing I would do is I'd go to Mayor Jackson and say, we need to work together as a team. that the city needs the region and the region needs the city, and we have to be on the same page, and we have to lock arms. We have to break down these silos. We have to tear down the walls and build bridges and invest together. Because the economic unit today, most economists believe, is not nations, it's not even states, it's regions. And you'll hear that next week from my friend Dave Abbott, who believes that too. That we are a country and a world of regional economies. And if we can make our region strong, Northeast Ohio, starting with Cuyahoga County and the city of Cleveland, that's how we'll do it. But it begins with the core. Any of you who exercise, you know that your personal trainer tells you begin with your core. That's true with economic development too, and our core is the city of Cleveland. So even if you live in Shaker Heights or Cleveland Heights, investing in the core will help the rest of the region too. So as county executive, I would be arm in arm, lockstep with the mayor of Cleveland, revitalizing downtown Cleveland, and then making sure that everyone in the region is sharing in the benefits of what we do. Now that's a short version of a longer answer, but that's the first thing I would do. The answer is he amenable to it? Yes, I think Mayor Jackson is amenable to that. Mayor Jackson, I think, has come to believe over the years that we do live in a regional economy and that we have to work together. So the answer is I do believe that Mayor Jackson is open to that. And I believe both candidates for county executive probably believe that too. I happen to personally support Armin Budish, but I believe probably both candidates believe that. Yes?
Speaking about the core, in all naivety, why does industry move to the suburbs and exurbs instead of the core city of Cleveland? In my naivety, why do they do that?
The question is why do some companies like Eaton or American Greetings move to the suburbs? Well, part of it, to be quite honest, is the city's not doing a good enough job of making their case. Because the truth of the matter is, if I ran a large company like American Greetings or Eaton, I would definitely locate downtown. Why? Because the single most important thing you can have as a CEO of a major company is access to a talent pool. And if that talent pool between the ages of 25 and 34 is downtown and you're in the suburbs, guess what? It's going to be harder to attract them. But right now, suburbs are competing with suburbs that put money on the table. And because cities aren't necessarily making the persuasive argument that I tried to make today, that this is the place to go, that's why too many companies are still moving to the suburbs. But I have a prediction. And my prediction is that over the next 10 years, you're going to see more and more and more major companies moving to cities. More and more. So in other words, what I'm telling you is Eaton and American Greeting are on the wrong side of the trend. They're great companies. And I know they're both CEOs and I admire them, but they're on the wrong side of history. Because within 10 years, the great companies will not be in the suburbs. Tony Hsieh, the CEO of Zappos, that was bought by Amazon, one of the biggest shoe companies in the world, had a choice whether to stay in the suburbs of Las Vegas and Henderson, Nevada, or to move to the city of Las Vegas. And what did he choose? He did the opposite of what some companies do. He moved downtown. And he's making the downtown their campus. He's integrating their employees into the city. And guess what's happening? People are actually moving to Las Vegas, not for the Strip and for the gambling, but so they can work in downtown Las Vegas, not the Strip, and be close to all this excitement and this innovation and these new startups, and to work either for Zappos or one of the many young companies that Zappos is trying to form. All I'm telling you is that it's a trend that is being reversed and will be reversed more and more rapidly over the coming years. Stuart. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Stuart, you're second. You're second, over here. Wait 1 second.
Comment and a question.
Yes.
The Wall Street Journal about a month ago had a really nice front page article about Cleveland that you might want to tell your children about. My question is, do you see Metro Health's desire or coming wish to rebuild being an anchor for transformation on the near west side, West 25th Street, the way University Hospitals has built so many buildings out Euclid and into East St. Louis, East Cleveland?
Yes, I do.
East St. Louis.
I
Went
know
to
what you
school
mean.
St. Louis,
I know what you
WashU,
mean.
so I'm
Okay.
fixing my
Yes, I do. The major employer in most American cities today is not a company like American Greetings or Eaton or PNC. You know what they are? Hospitals and universities. And hospitals and universities are called anchors. They can't move because they have the name of the city in their name. The Cleveland Clinic is not going to move to St. Louis and be the St. Louis Clinic. University Hospitals is not going to move to Chicago. Case Western Reserve is not going to be moving to San Francisco. So it's no surprise that what's happening is the anchor institutions, primarily but not exclusively the universities, the colleges, and the hospitals, are creating these hubs. In our city, it's that area of University Circle and down Euclid Avenue. And I believe that the future of American cities will be around these anchor institutions, creating these anchor districts where businesses flock so they can be close to a hospital, where they can be close to a university, where they can create a research partnership, where they can bring in talent. And sometimes they'll be downtown, sometimes they'll be extensions of downtown like University Circle. But Metro Health and UH and Cleveland Clinic and Case Western Reserve and Cleveland State and Tri-C are arguably the 6 most important players in the future of this region and the future of this city. And helping them expand and helping them invest and helping them connect to each other is one of the greatest things we can do as an economic development strategy. Stuart.
Lee, is anybody using the techniques in a 10,000-house subdivision in Philadelphia that Kaiser was building? We arranged to give down payment loans through Kaiser, college graduates who had no money, nothing but debt,
Mm-hmm.
and get them to come into the community. And then marketing Cleveland neighborhoods, which we did with Voinovich, we got CEOs to offer down payments or grants who had operations in the cities to encourage their employees to live near where they were.
What Stuart asked, for those of you who couldn't hear, because,
Question.
yes, I'm going to, because his microphone wasn't working. What Stuart asked is, what about having companies provide down payments for their new employees or their current employees to live downtown? And the truth is that that is actually a trend, and it's happening more and more. Cities are competing for that most precious commodity on earth, talent. And they're finding that one of the best ways to do it is to encourage them not just to come to their company, but to come to the city in which they are located, and to do that, to give them some financial incentive actually to live. We're an affordable city compared to many other cities, but it still can be expensive. And so, yes, more and more cities around, more and more companies around the world are, as part of their incentive package to bring talent, offering to actually help pay for people to stay in the city. Very often there's a condition that they have to stay a certain amount of time, and it may end up being a loan that turns into a grant. There's lots of different ways to do it, but the answer, Stuart, is that is the trend, and you're going to see more and more of it. Yes?
When you mentioned companies moving to Las Vegas, what came to my mind was water. And I wonder what we are doing in Ohio to recognize the gold mine we have here in this region, especially thinking of the algae bloom that we just experienced in Toledo.
I think that in many ways water is the new oil, meaning that over the next 10 years, those cities and those regions that have access to clean, fresh water are the ones where people will start moving to, cities and companies and citizens. All you have to take a look at is some of the drought problems that California and Southwest have had, and you think about the fact that the largest body of fresh water in the world outside of the polar ice caps is a place called the Great Lakes that we live on. It's 10 minutes from here. And all of a sudden, we should take advantage of it. So one way to take advantage of it, first of all, is to make sure we keep it clean and to invest in what's necessary to prevent the algae blooms. The second thing we need to do is actually connect our downtowns to our waterfront so people can experience the water and touch the water and see the water. And then the third thing we need to do is to attract water-related companies who want to be in a place like Cleveland because they can take advantage of that. There's water. There's all different kinds of companies around the world that somehow relate to the use of water. And Milwaukee has created what they call a water institute, where they're bringing some of the smartest people and the greatest researchers in the world to Milwaukee. It's very smart. Milwaukee's on the Great Lakes too. There's no reason Cleveland couldn't do that. And you asked me one of the things I would do as county executive. One of the things I would do is make taking advantage of our water in all respects probably one of my top 1 or 2 priorities, because it is one of those distinctive assets, our purple cow, that Cleveland has that many other cities don't. And the more we take advantage of that water in all respects, the more likely it is that your children will move from San Francisco to Cleveland.
Yes, hi. I was curious, the Cleveland Metropolitan School District, I think it's safe to say that they're lagging behind city development a little bit. And how important do you see school improvement for Cleveland reaching its goals?
It's essential. It's essential for several reasons. Number one, think about all those millennials who are moving to downtowns. The truth is, they're going to move to the suburbs when they have children, unless the schools in those cities are great. In other words, it's easier to make your decision as a single to move downtown, but it's much harder to make your decision to stay or to live downtown if you have school-age children and you want the best schools. And the truth of the matter is, until we both make our public schools better and make the alternative schools and the alternative charter schools attractive options and do both, not one or the other, we're going to have a serious problem with actually keeping our downtowns as vital as they are becoming. The second is that most economists believe that if you had only one measure to use as to what makes a city or a region successful, it's more complicated than that, but if you only had one measure, you know what that measure would be? Per capita income. What's the average earnings of the people in your city and your region? And what is the greatest single determinant of income? Education. Your level of education and the quality of your education. So the truth is, most economists have now begun to understand that if you truly want to raise the quality of your region, you have to make substantial investments in education at all ends of the continuum, starting with a healthy pregnant mother and a nurtured child, all the way to opportunities for 2-year, 4-year degrees, technical degrees, and graduate degrees in that entire continuum. And so, yes, investing in our schools is a vital part of economic development, and that would also be in my top 5 as county executive.
One of the areas in which Cleveland is number 1 is in its poverty rate. In this little book, it's 42%. And that's a very complicated problem, as you know. But one of the issues is that we have such concentrated poverty in the urban core. What creative solution might you have to redistribute that poverty a little bit so people have a better, perhaps more opportunities?
The question was, what can we do to alleviate and reduce poverty, particularly given the fact there are many pockets of deep poverty in our urban, I think that's when I go like this maybe, I don't know, in the urban neighborhoods or cities. This is also in my top 5 as county executive. I'm not even running for county executive, but I'm building my own platform. The answer is that the greatest economies, whether they're city, state, regional, or global, are ones that have a rising tide that lifts all boats and that leave no citizen behind. Easier said than done. But the truth of the matter is that there needs to be inclusive economic growth, where we align equity with growth in the way that, and the ways to do that are, for example, to require that when you are doing a new development that you set aside a certain percentage for affordable housing. So you're giving an incentive for different layers of the socio-economic ladder to participate in that renaissance. If everyone moving downtown is like my son or daughter, a yuppie, who is middle class or higher, that in and of itself is not going to improve our city. But if they are living in the same building or within a half-mile radius of people who are not necessarily middle class, who are aspiring up the economic ladder, but right now are lower income or even in poverty, all of a sudden you have a city that is beginning to integrate. And one of our measures in City Vitals is called economic integration. To what extent do people of different income levels live near each other? And the more policies we can promote to actually have that mix, so that for example, you're linking transportation to jobs. If you bring jobs to your city, but you have no way for people of low income to get to those jobs, you don't have an equitable city. So having something like a health line is key. So I would say, if I had to pick two things that are key to making sure that we reduce poverty, it would be to make sure that we have affordable housing choices and multiple options for transportation to link people to jobs. Those are the two biggest things we can do. Help people get to their jobs quickly and easily without having to drive a car, and to give them the option to live near where they work by making it more affordable. Before I forget, this is a shameless plug. We did a little book on Cleveland called Cleveland, a Connected City Field Guide, and because we're a struggling nonprofit, I did give you something for free today, but we sell these, I have to admit. So if you're interested in, I'll pass this around, if you're interested in buying one, they're $10, and you can go to our website. You may not want it, but I'm just telling you we do this because we're trying to pass the hat and make some money for COs for Cities at some point. Yes?
I just had the good fortune to visit a vineyard on down on Huff Avenue area.
Ah.
And I just wondered, is that just a blip on the screen, or do you think that that's a diversity that's going to enhance a lot of the things you've just been talking about?
Yeah, Roger, I don't think it's a blip on the screen. More and more entrepreneurs are doing creative things in urban neighborhoods, particularly around food and wine, but particularly food. Focusing on locally grown food and fresh food, because one of the biggest problems we have in our urban neighborhoods, and by the way, this would be the number 3 thing I would do, is make sure that fresh produce and fresh food is accessible to people in our poor neighborhoods. The fact that they have to drive out of their neighborhood to get food is inexcusable. So giving more local food options to our poor neighborhoods is key to the renaissance of cities. And I would say vineyards are probably not going to be the future of Cleveland, but having more locally grown food options in Cleveland will be a part of it. And you should ask Dave Abbott about that next week, as Dave is part of that movement, has been funding some projects in that area. Yes, Susan. Susan, how long did I talk today?
Oh, I don't know.
Okay, okay.
I just have a question on the millennials. We all read about these national trends and statistics about what the millennials are doing. Has any local research been done on millennials, and who's done it, and kind of give us some background on the local millennial situation?
The question about the local millennial. Yes, there is a local researcher. His name is Richie Paparian. He is just, there's a new Center for Population created at the Levin College of Urban Affairs at Cleveland State, and he's sort of the local expert on millennials and talent. And what he's finding, and it's very interesting, is that we don't have a leaving problem, we have a coming problem. In other words, our biggest problem is not that our young people are leaving, despite your story about San Francisco. It's that we don't have enough people coming to Cleveland. And so as a result, yes, we have to do both. We have to do talent retention, keeping your daughter here after she graduates college, but also attracting new people. Now, how do you attract new people to your city? Here are the ways you do it. Number one, you start with your city, because most likely, according to the statistics, most millennials want the option to be able to live in their city and have it be, I'm sorry, it's me, I just don't know what I'm doing, and have it be a city that's connected and that is vibrant, where you can live, work, play, and shop all within a 1 or 2 mile radius without ever getting in a car. Number two, you need to make sure that you find all those people with some sort of connection to Cleveland around the world. Here's what I mean. When I met with employers, when I was Director of Economic Development for Ohio, I would say to them, tell me about the profile of the people who you're hiring, and almost without exception, you know what they would say? We're finding people who want to come back home because they either grew up here, they went to school here, they have a grandmother here, they've got a parent here, they've got some emotional thread that connects them back to Cleveland. If we can start identifying all those people, like your children in San Francisco, and communicating to them on a regular basis what's happening, I think those are our greatest chances of success. Exciting cities and taking advantage of the threads that people have emotionally to come back and have that sense of belonging, to actually live where they grew up or where they have an emotional connection or a family connection. That will be our greatest strength if we can do that. And the cities that are connecting with their diaspora, the people around the world who have a connection to the city, are the ones who are strategically doing that and revitalizing the cities. Those are the ones who are having the greatest success in getting people come back to their cities.
I was at the one community event yesterday at the One World, I guess.
One World event, yes.
Event there. And I noticed a lot of older people. I did notice some younger people too. Those kinds of events, I think, can help and bring that forward in terms of the emotional connection. Because there were people there that had to get back to see some of those gardens if ever, and they were wandering around and being excited about what they were seeing.
Susan said that there's been an event here in Cleveland recently called the One World event. It's this weekend. It's going on as we speak, right? And that are bringing different generations to parts of Cleveland where they can actually experience what's going on in Cleveland. And the answer is events are one of the strategies for bringing people together, particularly if you can make your event an iconic event, an event that people from around the world come to. Like, for example, there's a little city in Michigan called Grand Rapids. And it comes alive for 3 weeks every year because they run the largest international art prize competition in the world. And what's interesting about this art prize competition is that the artists put their installations up everywhere throughout Grand Rapids, both outside and inside. Almost every building you go to, you see these different exhibitions. And the people who vote for the art prize are anybody who's in Grand Rapids during those 3 weeks. You actually register and vote. And so it's voted by the citizens, not by some fancy panel of great artists. And it's become an iconic kind of event where people actually come to Grand Rapids and experience, and some people end up moving to Grand Rapids. Same thing with Austin, Texas, and the South by Southwest Festival that brings music and technology and music, technology, and I can't remember the third. And what's happening is that if you can create an event like that that attracts people not only within your city but from outside your city for a couple weeks where they can experience your city in that kind of way, that's a very attractive way as well to become a more distinctive city and get people to come. And not just visit but stay.
I got to take the priority, if you don't mind, of asking the last question. We've been concentrating on the connectiveness that is so important in our society. And you have been talking with great sense and with very great creativity about cities and our city. But there has been a movement underground that has never really connected or been something that has become a reality, I should say, and that is regionalization.
Yes.
And have you seen success with those areas that actually have become metropolitan areas between maybe two major cities, or certainly in our area, we have all these, 55, 60 municipalities. Does that make sense? And how can we create what we need to in order to be more successful?
Well, it's a wonderful question, and it is one of the biggest challenges we have, because there's no question that as Cleveland goes, so goes Northeast Ohio, and as Northeast Ohio goes, so goes Cleveland. They're linked together. And unless you have a government that's regional, it's very hard to pull the levers of decision-making that actually affect the region. So the fact that we've moved to a county executive is a step in the right direction, but we don't have a regional government. There are some cities that do, like Louisville and Nashville, and they have managed to have much more of an effect on their regional economy because they have a regional government. Do we have too many governments, local governments? Absolutely. Are we likely to be able to merge them and eliminate them within our lifetimes? Probably not. Why? Because of political turf, ego, power, all the wrong reasons, but they're realities nonetheless. So yes, the more collaboration and sharing we can have between cities, the more sharings of services, the better. But in the end, it is my belief that while we should always be moving in that direction, I still believe that the greatest single way to move the trajectory of a regional economy is to start with your core city. And unless you have a regional government that can actually help you do that, you have to focus first and foremost on your core city and let the ripple effect go out. That's an easier said than done strategy, but I would tell you that if we could get a regional government in Northeast Ohio over the next 10, 15 years, that would be a very positive step in the right direction. But I would tell you that if we spend all our energies there, we lose the immediate opportunity of revitalizing a city that I also can have that kind of very powerful transforming effect, not just on the city, but on its outlying suburbs and the entire region itself.
Lee, I can't thank you enough. I think this has been one of the most exciting mornings. I think you have lighted the fire for us to really consider that we are in a renaissance period for the city of Cleveland and our suburbs linking into it. So I want to thank you tremendously for being here this morning.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you.
You have also mentioned a great deal about our speaker for next week on September 21. It is true. David Abbott, the executive director of the George Gunn Foundation, will speak to us on the important role that foundations have played in strengthening cities economically, educationally, artistically, and environmentally, obviously with the money that they give and their support. So thank you. I hope to see all of you next Sunday, and I want to thank all of you for coming today.
Thank you. Yes.